And if I could have a motion to pass the minutes of the previous meeting, John, seconded by Evelyn. Any changes, deletion, corrections? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? So moved, and what are we gonna start with, Jeff?
We start with airport.
Airport.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First two items on the agenda are some travel requests. The first one is for myself to attend Advocacy Day in Albany. That I am a sponsored event. That'd be on March 15th and 16th. I'll be driving down each day, no hotel accommodations necessary. Registration cost of $95.
Okay, how about we'll do both of them in a second one? Can you explain that?
Sure, that's for the the annual ARF training for our two firefighters at the airport, Brian Giroux and Derek Blackmer. Again, this is in-state travel. Registration and hotel fees are $525 per person, and that's out in Rochester, New York. This is part of our annual firefighter training.
Okay, the motion to get them on the floor by Evelyn, seconded by Ron. Okay, discussion. I'm gonna call you Rob.
And these are in your budget?
Okay, anything else? Call the question, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved.
Okay, finally, I wanted to give the committee a brief update on the status of the fuel farm upgrade project out at the airport. I included in the packet on the last page a half-size drawing of the plans for the fuel farm improvements. We're going to be replacing both fuel tanks out at the airport. Just to recap, we currently have the jet tank out of service due to a failure with the secondary containment liner for the above-ground concrete vault that the tank sits inside of. So we have a temporary tank storage right now that we're renting. This project will replace both the avgas and the jet tank, and it will include a driveway area, as you can see in the southern part, that curved loop there. That's going to be a new driveway slash containment area for loading, unloading, and for the vehicle parking. It'll all be graded so that the low point will be the catch basin at the bottom of the drawing. In that catch basin, we're going to employ a oil stop valve. Basically what that'll do is if any oil spilled in that area, the oil stop valve will prevent the stormwater or the runoff from going into the creek.
Any questions?
So that would be out of that?
Yep,
Right there?
that's it.
Okay. What happened to the liner?
Well, those tanks really aren't ideally situated for our climate. It's a rubber liner, and the tanks have a seal around the top of it, and that seal had failed numerous times. We've tried to seal it. I don't know how many times we tried to seal that tank, but water gets in there through capillary action, and once the water gets in there in the wintertime, it'll freeze, expansion, contraction, and it's ripped that bladder, and we no longer have secondary containment in case the tank were to fail.
We're not using that tank right now.
No, that tank's out of service.
Yeah.
Yep.
So then the new one is going to be set up how?
The new tank will be a double-walled steel tank, and it will have a secondary containment, but it won't be the same design. The secondary containment we're hoping to get with our plans will be a separate tank on the end of the tank, so that the purpose for that secondary containment is for overfill prevention. So in case there is a malfunction during the filling procedures, that will spill into that secondary tank at the end of the tank, I guess. There'll be two tanks. Currently, they're cylindrically diked. This will be a dike that is off the end of the tank.
Anything else?
Chairman, thank you.
Ron?
I know you're putting together a spreadsheet to kind of provide for us a cost expense kind of analysis. I would hope that the spreadsheet would at least begin to incorporate into it on the expense side the kind of recurring capital costs that we have periodically. This would represent one. There are others.
Sure.
Anything else, Rob?
No, that's all I have. We do have, well, I will add, we do have a schedule for this project. I'll add that we hope to have 95% drawings this week, and the plan is to submit those to local code enforcement, and bidding will be April 1st. So we're hoping to have this out to bid fairly soon and begin construction this summer, put the new tanks into service as quickly as possible. That's all.
All right. And, Frank? Rachel?
Mr. Chairman, I just wanna follow up on the discussion we had last month. You had asked me to speak with Bill Mason regarding the advisory council, the advisory board for the airport. And I did have a chance to speak with him this month. We're going to meet next month before the next committee meeting to talk a little bit more in depth, and I'll send you that information for that meeting time. But he was very interested in discussing, more about reestablishing that council as well,
Okay.
and getting that information back to the committee.
All right, thank you.
Follow up that I did that.
Frank?
Mr. Chairman, before we start, I apparently printed the wrong cover sheet. There is a request for an executive session at the end to discuss a particular business. Yeah, we can do that at the end.
Did you wanna do your business first, and we'll
Yeah.
do that at the end? Is that okay?
Yeah, I had it on the agenda, but I must have printed the wrong agenda.
That's fine.
The first item I have is the temporary court update. We're 99% finished in the temporary court. We got our doors started coming in Friday. We got another load this morning, so as soon as we get the doors installed, they'll be 100% up and running. They have used the courtroom twice. They had an overflow 2 weeks ago, so they did use the courtroom. They put some furniture in there, and they're very happy with it. So we're coming along good, I would say. We just gotta get the doors in. On page 3 of your packet, there's a drawing of the loop road, and I think Jeff wanted to speak to the parking issue there.
Yeah, I just, thanks, Mr. Chairman. I wanna draw, the committee's attention to the extreme left side of the drawing, where you see in hatch marks outside of the ring road, a small parking lot. That's what I had been talking to the committee about, adding a park and ride, outside of the ring road. Currently, the main lot, right next to the courts is where people utilize space for park and ride. So what this would do would be to get that out of the main court parking lot. It would be segregated outside of the ring road, provide 20 spaces for park and ride there. And our intent with this is to establish it with DPW forces. It's outside the critical path as far as schedule goes for the contractor work starting this summer. So we can box out and place stone and gravel essentially to get that lot established. And then as our normal construction season allows, we'll be back to pave that and stripe it with our own forces. So I just wanted to let the committee see that. This is the first draft of where that park and ride lot would go. But because it is a change to our campus, I wanted to make sure the committee understood the concept and was on board with that.
Any questions, or
Be 20 spaces over there?
Right.
Craig?
Lighting, we have new light poles over there or anything?
There's currently a light pole, I apologize for the size of the drawing, but there's a light pole right here.
Okay.
And it's kind of, it's not quite centered on that light pole, it's a little bit further north. So immediately we'll have some light in the area. And as part of the bigger project, there are, lights being added into the parking lots as part of the bigger project. So
Okay.
I would anticipate that would be incorporated later, at a later date, part of the big project.
Okay.
So what we'll do on this project, again, we'll use DPW forces. There'll be highway forces, so I'll need to back charge the project, but it'll be revenue into highway. It'll be a charge against the project for our time and equipment. And then the materials will just direct charge right into the capital project.
Claudia?
And I assume we've looked at whether or not there's already enough space, like, over towards the Health and Human Services building to designate an area rather than create a new one?
I haven't really studied the use of those lots. I know, those lots typically have days that are quite full, just anecdotally. I haven't studied it specifically to do a survey of that. Our thought was the current location has been working, it's right near the main entrance off of Route 9. So we're really just moving the area that they're using now across the way. Part of our concern isn't our overall, parking need when the project is completely done, because we're actually gonna have more parking available by the end of the project. So you'll see on the drawing here, the areas that are blacked out, at least in the early phases of the project, are gonna be, areas where the contractor's gonna have to stage some equipment and materials to build the addition onto the north side. Once the family court space is complete and we move family court into there, the renovations in the main, area the contractor will still need to use, portions of the parking lots for staging of equipment and materials. So our concern is this is gonna be a long-term project, 3 to 5 years by the time we get done with all the renovations, hopscotching through the building. So we wanna have ample parking, during the construction to allow the staging areas. In the end, we're gonna end up with a net gain of parking, which makes sense too because of the additional court staff, the additional court space, and court, cases that'll be held. So we're anticipating a growth in use of the parking lots above and beyond what we have now.
John?
Well, two things. One is, we definitely need more park and ride space. I mean, at exit 18, people not only use the park and ride space we have designated for park and ride space, but we have the kiosk visitors parking spaces, and people use those for park and ride. But in addition, this parking lot could have a secondary purpose. This is a little bit early on, I know, but nevertheless, it's a good thing to keep in mind. Part of the exit 20 corridor study includes bicycle accommodations. And there's always been a wish, and it's been around a long time, to have some kind of visibility, some kind of parking for visitors to the area who wish to use the bike trails. So, visitors hear about the Warren County Bike Trail, but how do you get to it? Where is the parking?
This doesn't go over it, does it? Where's the bike trail?
So, in any event, this could be an excellent facility, especially the park and ride would be weekdays, and, the people using the bike trails would be weekends, so it would get good use, I believe. So someday, my hope is that we have a nice sign there that says, here, parking also for the Warren County Bikeway, and then a little sign depicting directions on how to get to the Warren County Bikeway.
Good point.
And right off of the exit 20, a perfect location. You had a question?
That makes me feel better about putting down a nude parking lot that we don't even think is gonna be there for a long
It'd
time.
be great use for that.
Yeah,
Anything
the
else?
bike trail went this way, but it's back here.
Yeah, well, I always access the bike trail, by using the sidewalk, depending on the traffic, using the sidewalk or the, Route 9 to gain access over by the boat place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Craig?
You said temporary, but once this goes in, this stays, right?
This is permanent.
Yeah, once
Right.
we blacktop it, it's
Yeah.
not gonna come back up.
Okay, Frank, anything else?
The second item I have is the municipal center security. Very pleased with how smoothly it's gone to switch over to the fob access. We really haven't had any trouble. So my final plan is to change the outside locks on the building, and I'll probably do that next week, or at least start phasing it in next week. I may hear some noise then when I do that, but, if it goes as smoothly as it has, I don't anticipate any problems. Employees, I think, actually prefer the fobs. So this will tell all, we'll change the outside keys, and then you'll have to use the fob to get in the building. But I think it'll go smoothly, and so by mid-March, we'll be completely, the security system will be in place.
Okay, great. Jeff?
Just to add on to that, what this will mean is, the current hard metal keys that some of the employees have, and maybe had for decades, will not function anymore. They'll need to use the fob, as part of the new security measures. The, emergency, personnel, fire EMS, they still have access, and our key maintenance personnel still have access. If there's a problem with the fob system, we'll still be able to get into the building. But right now, we're trying to get a handle on some keys that have been out, you know, and in use for decades, because those keys can cause problems with the fob system and override the fob system if they're not used properly. So we're trying to limit the number of personnel to key maintenance staff, like Frank and some of his key staff, some of my key staff, myself and Kevin Hajos, and then fire, EMS, and law enforcement still have access through their systems in place.
I have something that isn't on the agenda, but I appreciate the committee's input. The Historical Society's been very interested in our buildings over on Gurney Lane. Specifically, the one is being used by Code Blue. And with the resurrection of the Code Blue, they did attend a meeting where we passed that and okayed it. But they definitely need to expand and get out of the location they're in. They set up a meeting a few weeks ago to discuss with the chairman and administrator, myself, as far as what our intentions are and how to move forward. And Paul brought to light that there's some discussions with the Exit 20 and possibly a circle there and some traffic issues, et cetera, and that the buildings might come into play. But Jeff attended the meeting and said that he thought the buildings themselves were okay in locations, but the access to the 20 acres that we want to develop certainly would come to light if they put that in. That being said, that's all in the offing and will take years to develop, et cetera. And they're kind of looking for an immediate rescue here of their situation and to move forward so they can do more teaching programs, et cetera. And a pretty productive meeting. The way it ended up was, worst case scenario, if we allowed them to take over the buildings in any form or fashion, purchase them or lease them, et cetera. If we came to terms with that, and then in 5 whatever years, our traffic study, you know, made it so that those buildings had to be removed or whatever, worst case, would they still be interested in moving on today? So they said they want to go back to their board and talk and you know, give them the scenario, et cetera. Maryland did call me back. They want to continue discussions. They do certainly want to look at this and they want to proceed. So I told them that I would bring it up to the committee, and with your, you know, blessing, we would have another meeting with them and see all the ins and outs and what we can and can't do. I personally think it's a really worthwhile project, great organization. This Marilyn Van Dyke's a very, very unique and hard-working person, done a great job, and they would like to get back into more teaching aspects, which I think they don't think they can do with their facilitations they have right now. So if you have any input you want to give me now as far as proceeding, let me know. John?
Well, not only that, but I know, because I used to be on the board, that they would like to have a Warren County Museum, at least, you know, with one of those buildings. Where they are now, they don't have the space for that. And they can get grant funding and so forth for a Warren County Museum. But also, since it is the Warren County Historical Society, other historical societies, you know, up north, that would like to be, you know, more precipitating in the Warren County Historical Society. But where they're located now, off of Sunnyside Road, they're a little bit off the beaten path and difficult to get to. Whereas this location would be ideal for the northern historical societies to come down and meet there. At least it'd be better than where they are on Sunnyside Road. So there are some advantages to that building.
They want to have anything against proceeding with discussions with them. They eventually would come before the committee with a plan, and then where we can vet them and ask questions and et cetera. But I didn't want anyone to think that we're meeting with them without the blessing of the committee, and that it was something healthy and that we wanted to do. If anybody has anything against that, let me know. And Jeff?
Just to follow up on Supervisor Strauss' comments, at least the current intent of the Historical Society was to use the old WIC building, which is the one closest to Gurney Lane for administrative offices, and to use the detention home as a museum. So that's their long-term goal, and, they'd said initially their concern is getting an administrative office established. So they may be looking shorter, in the short term to utilizing the WIC building to get some offices established, and then their long-term goal would be to use the other building as a museum.
And they'll come and map that out, but it looks good with their board, with what we've discussed, and then we did wanna pass that along to Code Blue, that if we're proceeding, that they would, certainly, it might not be available next year for Code Blue, so it's kind of, and Kim Cook, I think, understood that, 'cause as soon as Code Blue came along, Maryland certainly was calling us, wanting to know what our intentions were, so. Okay. Ron?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, is your thinking right now that, at least on the short term, that there should be a lease arrangement as opposed to a...
Yeah, some of the difficulties is that if they wanted to purchase it, there's difficulties in how you go about that, with a competitive bidding, and it doesn't look like we could do that. So it looks like we would have to lease it to them just on the onset. We haven't had the attorney involved, et cetera. But I don't, I think it would be a healthy thing for the county to get the buildings back being utilized, and there might be possibly a tourism component with this also. It's a great location. There's some other things that we can do and develop, and they certainly would work with us with all that. And we talked about, vis-a-vis, because of what it offers, maybe there's some bed tax money if we had a tourism component, et cetera, to make it more than just a historical stop, But those are all things that we can discuss as we move forward. Jeff?
Just not to complicate it further, but the other big decision is what is gonna happen to that remaining parcel where the old annex building was removed, because right now those two buildings are on that same parcel. So they would have to be, somehow, subdivided again, with access through to that back lot. So I think that decision on how the county wants to proceed with, final use of that annex parcel can feed into this as well.
But with entry, et cetera, and the developer coming along, all those come into play after the fact, so those will all have to be, hashed out.
Well, the difficulty here, the scale is gonna be how strong a lease. In other words, their leases, and then their leases, right? From their perspective, they're looking to make an investment. How big an investment, I think, relates to how permanent they consider the situation. On our end, we have other, as you've mentioned, a couple of other things that are kind of orbiting here that we need to keep our eye on. So it would seem to me that, maybe even a progressive kind of lease, where maybe the lease evolves in time. Maybe it's a certain kind of lease on the short, but maybe as things move on, maybe it becomes a stronger lease. It just is a suggestion in terms of an approach. That way, they know they have certain opportunities right on the front end. We're preserving our needs as they evolve, and then hopefully all of this meets on down the road somewhere.
Yeah. And I think we laid that all out before them, our considerations, so that they're not getting blindsided with anything when they make a commitment. So they understand us moving forward, some of the complexities of how we're proceeding. So, we're gonna address what we have to address to, make sure our interest in the 20 acres that we wanna develop is certainly has a future to it, and that we're not boxing ourselves in. And, they understand that we would like to work with them in every way we can moving forward. Jim?
Excuse me, thanks. Would this committee deal with the Code Blue problem? I mean, we seem to be doing it sort of on an ad hoc basis. I mean, shouldn't we look at, so that we don't constantly have a problem with, trying to find a place for the Code Blue problem? I mean, shouldn't the county look at the whole thing and...
I guess the answer is that the Code Blue, my understanding is the Code Blue wasn't particularly excited about that location, but it certainly was something that fit because of the codes and the accommodations that you immediately have to get a code blue set up and structured. And, that was not gonna be a permanent site. Your question about should the county be involved in the next location thereof, I'm not sure what, the operation, at the soup kitchen, where they're at with that and, where Kim Cook is with it. But I do know what I've said, they understand that could possibly be used and they have to find another place. And I think they're extending an effort to do that now. Now, what the county's position on, finding a location for it, I know the cities work conjunctively with them. I'm not that well versed on, the last I heard is that they have an agreement to purchase a building to accommodate all this, but whether or not and when that happens, I don't know.
Well, that's my basic question. I mean, Code Blue seems to be a city problem and not a county problem, and we have, like, the SPCA dealing, that's become a county thing. We should look at it county-wise, because there are homeless people up north as well as in Queensbury. It shouldn't be just Swims Falls.
Claudia?
I'm kind of thinking that it's something that maybe social services should take up, because I think there are new mandates about the county needing to be involved. Could be wrong, does anyone have a clue? Alright. So it would, maybe if it's taken up through social services, and then it could come back to us to help with Code Blue, whatever aspect the county can.
Rachel, you have something?
When we spoke about this at the board meeting, one of the really positive things that came out of that, besides finding shelter for this winter, was that Chairman Gerard did indicate willingness to sit around a table, bring together a focus group using Waite House, using Kim Cook, social services. There's been increased collaboration with social services and the Open Door since this venture took place a few months ago. I know Kim has spoken publicly that, they do have a different building, but has a desire to work on a county-wide initiative in terms of addressing some of those gaps. So I know that was something that we discussed previously,
Yeah.
just haven't put it in motion yet. And
Well, some of it was because, the shelter that social services uses in Saratoga, those people came up and had discussions with the city. And, when I talked to Councilman at Large Dan Hall and the mayor, they said it was very informative, and that, I didn't attend the meeting, so I don't like to paraphrase everything I heard, but there was an intent for them possibly to locate a shelter up here. I don't know the accuracy of this, because I was not at the meeting, but there also was, there was some things that they had to get, from social services as far as promissory, that they would send their people there so that they could afford to operate something like this. But that is a separate, business or whatever from the Open Door. So the Open Door is doing their thing and looking for their place, and, the shelter came up and talked to the city. So collectively, I did get the number of the shelter director, and he would come up and, speak to us, Rachel, and was gonna do that, and then the governor put out the order, and I guess he's inundated with what the requirements, so I told him when he got all settled down, there wasn't a hurry, but we did, as a county, we did wanna sit down and discuss, and I think then we should involve social services and Matt, et cetera, and see what they have to offer. But that would be separate from the Code Blue, because it's a different entity, and, it does get pretty complicated.
Well, part of I'd also thought social services, but we need to start the discussion someplace about it not just being a city problem, because our planning board and everybody's been dealing with it a lot, and I don't see much of it up here, and I think it should be as well up here, so that we, because it is a county problem, not just a city problem.
Okay. Matt?
I'll just add to it, DSS does work throughout the county in these situations. We may not hear about it, but they do have, there is no mechanism at this point, between the Code Blue, it's just two separate entities, working in two different planes.
Right.
Well,
So there is an ongoing effort.
But we need to
Claudia?
It was my understanding that Code Blue was working with the county when the governor's executive order came down. Kim Cook was stepping in to serve the role that the county was supposed to be doing. I mean, maybe not. That was there, you know, she was serving the role, she was serving the role that the county should be playing. So I do think that we have some responsibility to come up with a plan for next year. If it's not necessarily the shelter, but a long-term shelter, but like the wintertime aspect that Code Blue does serve, fills that hole for homeless people who need somewhere to go in the winter.
Rachel?
Again, I think all this has been really positive, a lot of increased collaboration, particularly with social services and not-for-profits. And if I could just, maybe make the suggestion that we follow up in a few months with putting together that advisory group, including the White House, Open Door, DSS, our county, to look at homelessness as a problem in Warren County. Certainly, I think everyone agrees it's not just a city problem, it involves the entire county. And maybe just, we can follow up on that in a few meetings.
But our committee should be at the table with social services and all the other, okay. I think that's agreeable. Does anyone else have anything come before the committee before we go into executive session? Having none, could I have a motion to go into executive session? And what is the reason?
You wanna do it, Jeff, or me?
Well, I'll start and you can add if I need any other language in there, but it's to talk about the financial history of a particular corporation.
Okay. Accepted?
That's from the statute, I believe it's sufficient.
Okay, and the motion? Ron, second. John? All in favor? Aye. Or item to clarify.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Amanda just brought to my attention that one of the travel authorizations that Ross had submitted during the airport portion, this is for the guys to go to the ARF training in Rochester. The room rate exceeds the GSA rate by $18 a day. So Amanda advised me that we're gonna need a resolution for that. I would just urge the committee to consider sending to the full board a policy change that makes this a little bit less burdensome for $18 to do another resolution. Normally in these situations, I can speak from my own perspective, normally in these situations, either the fees are tied to conference space that is being utilized for the training, so naturally you're not just getting a room and a continental breakfast, you're getting other services. So sometimes when on some of these training and other conventions, the costs are higher because there are services that are above and beyond just an overnight stay. The GSA rates don't incorporate any estimates for conference space and for meeting space. Those are for rooms and those are for food, and that's it. The other situation is there's times where, in this case, where we've got training occurring, it's above the hotel room that's closest to the training that makes sense for them to stay in is, slightly above the GSA rate. But in order to, find a place that's under the GSA rate, they'd be adding additional hours onto their day of travel back and forth to the training. I would also encourage the committee and the board to consider maybe a threshold for exceeding GSA rate with, there's gotta be a mechanism in place where you can have a department head submit a statement saying that the reason why they're exceeding the GSA rate and give a little bit of flexibility, because this has occurred a lot. I've seen it occur a lot over the last couple of years. We've probably had a dozen resolutions about exceeding GSA rates for relatively very minor amounts.
Okay, could I get a motion for this 18 round, seconded by Matt? Any other discussion?
Yeah, I would just say that, if we can't assume that when we approved the travel, with the information that was provided, that in and of itself authorized the travel to take place at the approved rate, then maybe that's what we should have, is that when it comes in front of us and we approve the travel to go here to do this, that it's at the rate, that's at the published rate, and that we don't have to act twice. In other words, we're acting twice within the same process. I would think we would only need to do that once.
Okay.
So instead of two resolutions going to the board, we'd only have one.
Okay, call the question. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, anything else come before the committee? Claudia?
I just have a quick thing, you know, we're starting a new year with a new, money stream in the centers facility, and I would like to make sure that we do not get behind on our payments coming from them that go towards certain things that we cannot get out of.
Starting new year with who?
In light of the discussion that we had during executive session about getting behind on
Okay,
payments
yeah.
from a tenant, I do not wanna see us in a situation where we're behind on the payments coming from centers that we have to turn over to Siemens.
Okay.
'Cause we can't, right now, we can't get out of those.
Mike?
And that's a lot of money.
Basically what we've done is that we, and this will be coming to finance, the next finance meeting, some discussions about this, but we are making the lease payment, all right? We are not making the maintenance and the energy performance payments. And we are, and it's my understanding, Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, that Betsy has billed centers for at least 1 or 2 months anyway.
I have been careful not to get involved with Westmount or centers. Betsy does that outside of her DPW
Oh, that's right, I'm sorry,
responsibilities.
I apologize for that, you're right,
That would be a question for Lloyd Cote.
But as far as I know, the bills have been sent to them, we have not received any money. We will be coming to, finance to set up the accounts for that, because we're gonna have to be paying and we have a revenue source for that.
Just for the, more or less, just so we know the process, cause I'm not I don't know how the flow of, information goes here, but when the county collects rent, it goes to you guys, right, to the treasurer's office, and if there is an issue collecting, those payments, how long is it until that gets, sent over to the county attorney's office?
Well, I mean, because it's so limited the amount of time that we have these, I mean, couple months, I mean, if the 1 month is late, then the next month, we will probably send a notice over to the county attorney's office, just to put them on notice that the people were late.
Okay.
And then if it happens again, then I will be calling the county attorney.
Okay. I'd just like to call, it's after 10 and keep it on structure here. We've had a lot of dialogue with our issues here. So, motion to close by Matt, second by John, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Good job. Good job, Mr. Chairman.